everyone. Welcome back to Redefine the Circle. I'm Ashley Sunshine, co-owner and head of pitching development here at OGX, joined by our very own Ryker Chason, our director of pitching growth. Ryker, welcome back to Redefine the Circle.
I'm so excited to be back with you.
I know. Okay, so this is a different format. This is the format we've typically used for the what was the Bet on Me and now is the OGX podcast. Just because we're not always all like in the same physical location. So Redefine the Circle is usually if it's just me doing the episode or someone that's in the actual OGX facility, we'll do it in person. But Ryker, since you and I are always just like, sailing ships, passing each other through the night, we're going to join each other here virtually. So that's why we have a little bit of a change of our look is a little bit different today. So hopefully same level of quality content. Okay, so I'm really happy you are joining today because I've been kind of thinking of this topic for a few weeks and I've pitched it to you, no pun intended.
Yeah.
But I pitched it to you a couple times of like, I kind of want to talk about this. I feel like it's kind of misunderstood what we do with X and Y. And so I thought, you know what, let's just talk about the concept generally. And what that is we've been spending a lot of time, obviously, with our high school athletes as they're going into the in-season, like here in Illinois, and honestly, most of the country, high school athletes are now in high school season. And so early on in our process, we know a lot of our athletes just sort of like stopped their player development journey. They're like, now I'm playing. And we know because of how robust our systems are and how much data we've been able to collect over the last few years that like, they just can't do that, right? We see their data just tank from a performance standpoint. Velocity can go down. They're more likely to experience discomfort and pain. We see their movement quality and power going down. Like the more you play, the more that stuff tanks unless you're supporting it with appropriate warm-ups, enough low, moderate intensity work, good strength and conditioning. That definitely looks different in season, but that it's still there to sort of anchor the other side of that seesaw, if you will. So we talk a lot about that concept, but today I would like to shift that, not just about like, how important it is to keep up your player development journey while you're in season, but to really be specific about how this applies at the college level. And who better to bring on to talk about that than you, Ryker? Okay, so it's really this concept. I feel like I've been talking about this a lot, like of understanding player management. It's not versus player development because to me, player management is player development.
Right.
But player management, pitcher management, more specifically for the sake of this podcast today. Yeah. Pitcher management is like how you keep player development afloat and moving along while you're getting hammered with games, right?
Totally.
Okay. So that's the concept that I want to talk about. Basically, what does that look like? What does it entail? How are we doing that for coaches now? How are we obviously hoping to help more coaches in the future with that? But before we go into some of those details, I want to kick it to you to be able to go back into your SEC pitching coach shoes for a second. And you're at this point of the season, it's April, mid-April. There's a lot going on. And tell me about maybe like the types of things that are going on in your head. Obviously there's a lot of things that are going well, I'm assuming. There are things that are not. What are the types of things that are going through your head? What are the challenges, the pain points? And now that you've been here, what would be different if you were to go back and now know more about like how to manage pitchers in season? Good question, huh? Loaded. Take it away.
So just to start, I just wanted to comment on what you said about, UC athlete management, and athlete development, player management, player development as one and the same. And a lot of people don't, they don't. And I think that's probably what they get confused sometimes about, there's like player development, and then they try to manage within their own systems with maybe their AT or their strength coach. And they don't have the people who, even some of the people who use us, they don't have the people who we are like their player development people. They don't have us necessarily managing their athletes. And I think, I didn't understand that concept either. When I first started, at Ole Miss, it was like, I was kind of getting into what you guys were doing, a couple years ago. And I didn't understand that. I mean, our kids are still throwing 6 days a week. Sometimes they had pain. I went to the trainer, try to give her some, rehab, do some stuff in there, needle something, stretch something, and just keep going on what your guys' systems were. And I think, now that I'm here, I understand that a lot more. So I too agree with you, that player development, player management are one and the same, but I think a lot of people are not there yet. But to put back on my SEC pitching coach shoes in the midst of April. First off, the season is a roller coaster of
Mm-hmm.
emotions, as we all know, and April is your mid SEC play right now. You're 4 or 5 series in for some. You're starting to see the end of your fate of where what do we have to do to
Mm-hmm.
finish here in the SEC or do this from a performance standpoint to make a regional, and you start to kind of that some of that fear and worry and doubt starts to set in. So it's really tough emotionally for yourself and your athletes. And you can have some really high highs and some really low lows. You might, go out and beat, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee on a Friday night and then get run ruled
Yep.
on Saturday and you got to come back on a Sunday. So I just think this time of year specifically, for pitching coaches and athletes, fatigue. It starts to set in. You start to see what the way that I was, describing to you when you first brought this up is like, I think we look at performance in such a silo. And what we start to see from some of those athletes is a lack of performance, right? Like she had a bad game. She's on a bad stretch. She can't throw strikes. Her velo's down, whatever. We're looking at that performance just in a silo. And what I didn't know then, even what I would say is what I didn't even know in year 3, probably, of working with you guys. I started to understand it more, but really didn't know it yet, was that all the layers underneath performance. And I think when I was there, in year 1, we threw 6 days a week. I was like, we got too much to try to figure out. Poor
Mm-hmm.
some of those kids that were in my bullpen at that time. And then obviously it got better. I started to understand, what athletes kind of required what. Some that could handle a higher workload, some that needed lower. Who needed more plyos and variability, who needed less of that stuff, who could handle that stuff. In between, basically counting up their full intensity pitches from warm-ups and games, who needed what in between that. So I started to get real personalized, probably more in year 2 and definitely in year 3. But I still probably didn't quite understand, that now I'm at OGX, that really what goes into performance, the things underneath it. It could be, we're saying this kid is performing bad, but it could be our movement quality. Like we could see a regression in rotational capacity, lat length, things like that, that we can't see. And if we're not
Mm-hmm.
reassessing, that's my number one thing that I wish I would have done better, was just, even if I just did that, just reassessing movement quality. I think it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
The game is a beast. Pitching, especially, it's a beast. And the toll that it takes on the body, especially when you get into SEC play and somebody's got the hot hand and you're needing to ride it a little bit, you don't understand the impact underneath, the things that you can't see when she's throwing in the bullpen and she's throwing in the game, that are in there, that are going to come out weeks
Mm-hmm.
later. And what's going to happen is she's going to have one little bad week. Next week, still not going to get there. And then 2 weeks, and then she's like out of your rotation. It's that fast. And you
Mm-hmm.
don't even know because you're not reassessing movement quality. I wish I would have done that better. Um, but I think it's movement quality, and then to go another tier beyond that, as stress, as fatigue sets in, you start to see power come down. So you may see velocity come down, and you're not understanding really where that's coming from. So you're pulling them out of strength conditioning and out of other things. And what you don't understand is what they probably need is less pitching
Mm-hmm.
workload, and they need appropriate strength and conditioning and appropriate rest to try to get that
Mm-hmm.
power back up. I think that was one mistake I made too, is like I would kind of pull them away from things to make sure we could go after what we needed in pitching. But really what was actually going to make them better at pitching was to feed them more appropriate strength and conditioning and give them some rest. And then you tap into just stress in general, right? These kids are in college, they have tests,
Mm-hmm.
like they're
Yeah.
getting to the end of their semester where they have to make a certain grade in a class and do those things. So what we're able to do here, I did implement this my final year at Ole Miss, a little more of this wellness questionnaire,
Mm-hmm.
checking on them. But I definitely think that's something that we do a really, really good job of here at OGX now. So many of our athletes are remote, and a large majority of my athletes specifically are remote. And my ability to track their wellness data, I think that's one thing people don't understand too, is like we say data, they think ball flight and numbers. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking about, movement quality data. We're talking about power. We're talking about wellness data. We're talking about
Mm-hmm.
their mental and physical readiness and the stress that they are getting from everyday life that their central nervous system is having to take on. And so, I think my ability to track that and understand where these kids are at, and they start to perform poorly, and you go in and you see this trend over the last several weeks. My mental readiness is low today. My physical readiness is very low. I have widespread soreness.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really stressed. I have tests. I have a significant other, or something like
Yeah.
that going on. There's
Mm-hmm.
so many layers to it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the part that people don't really understand, and what I really wish I would have understood more being in that college coach seat.
Yep. You know what I just pictured? You know that I don't even know what it's referencing, but it's like a glacier or something coming out of the water, and it'll show you just the tip.
Yes.
And then it's like,
Yes.
but what's underneath of it? I don't, but
It's
I
like
pictured that.
success is the thing on
Yeah,
top and all the things underneath
exactly.
it. It's true.
Yeah, and I actually in my head like I kind of pictured that and like flipped it because I was thinking when someone's performance starts going down, whether it's velo, they're getting hit more, maybe we don't even realize it's because their brake profile has shifted,
Yeah.
or velocity has changed. But like when those things are happening, or they're experiencing pain,
Right.
that is the tip of that, like that little
Right.
like
We didn't even go into that
glacier
pain.
iceberg thing. But in
Right.
reality, what athlete management is about is understanding that you can get to it before it reaches that point. If you
Totally.
are monitoring the data you're referencing right now, which is like how is
Totally.
fatigue playing a role on her physically right now, from a standpoint of, is she less stable, is her posture breaking down, is that posture breakdown now impacting what her arm action looks like in the motion,
Right.
is she generally just so fatigued she's not able to produce much power in the right direction. um, Even below that, are we starting to see these red flags and warning signs? As you're saying, the athletes are reporting like, I'm stressed, I'm fatigued, like this is
Right.
going to play a role. So we track the data that's underneath of that like line, that like, I got to stop
And
referencing
every
baseball, but like,
every day. Every
yeah,
day we
every
track that.
day, right? And so
We
that
have
as soon
athletes
as
who
we
fill out their
see,
wellness questionnaire every day.
exactly. So as soon as we see these, like, okay, we now know this combo, this combo, this combo, as soon as we get a red flag, she's reported, we intervene with what she does that week. Like, what do you have
Totally.
going on? I have a game this day, this day, this day. Okay, here's what you're going to do in between that game. Here's what your warm up needs to be like. Here's what you're doing between that game. Like, as soon as those red flags start to hit, then we go right in, and there's some intervention, even if it's for the week, until like, how you feeling this week? I'm feeling a little bit better, right? Or like,
Yeah.
it might be that we take something out, we modify volume, whatever is appropriate for that. But that's what I'm thinking about. Is like, what you're waiting for as a coach is for it to get bad. Like, not that that's what you're waiting for, but that's when you notice it. You
That's when you notice
notice
when the
it
performance is bad.
is bad, or when your athlete's like, I have forearm pain, or like my back hurts. Like, now all of a sudden
Yep.
you have to notice if it's there, but it doesn't
Yep.
have to get to that. I also
Yep.
think there's just like something so interesting about, I've been spending a lot of time. It was on our podcast last week. I wrote a blog post about it this week about in our OGX podcast, Trisha Ford, A&M, obviously, for those who, I don't know, live under a rock. She asked a question, like an audio message for our podcast, of like, what do you think, now that we're understanding that the pitching motion is so much more complex than we ever
Yeah.
thought it was, like, how do you think that should influence workload at all ages, but particularly at young ages? So I've been like really reflecting on that, and in different ways kind of answering that. And I think what's so interesting is now that we're at this point where it's like, stop calling it a natural motion, understand how much it takes. The softball pitchers are so unique. Like, we're not comparing this to baseball, where
No.
in baseball, the pitchers who are taking on the most volume, they are given adequate rest. It's part of their culture.
Yep.
And so for in softball, like you're talking about, put your SEC coaching shoes back on. The level, the intensity of play weekend after weekend. Sometimes the ace is getting 2 out of 3 games in that series. And
Easily.
we're asking her to not only perform twice within that weekend, but then maybe she has to throw again in a midweek. And then she got
Yep.
to come back the next weekend, and the next weekend, and the next weekend. Like,
Yep.
the amount of workload, there is no comparison. So it is time in my mind for us to really understand that this is like, we've gotten it wrong because we didn't have the information on like how
Yeah.
important pitcher management is, because of how unique of a position it really is, and it's not
Totally.
compared to any other position on the game in the game. One could argue like the catcher makes as many throws, but not at that intensity, not at max intensity.
Yeah.
So there's no other position,
Yeah.
and there's no equivalent in baseball. So yeah, it takes so much more. So I I think some of the things that we see come up, like I said, like you talked about, movement quality, some very specific things. We'll see things of like, very clear indicators are, they'll start to lose rotational capacity. And what we know that's from is because they're tired, they're losing anterior core, and they're in a posture while in the air where there's a lot of like extension. And
Your body's just like, I'm done. I'm tapped.
right. And they're fatigued. So their posture isn't holding up. When posture isn't holding up, rotation is affected. And when rotation is affected, that like lat length is impacted, right? So it's like this cascade of issues. So if we can see them right away, we can like put a
Yeah.
squash on it.
And I would even go as far as to say that a lot of people don't even understand, their, we say performance, right? So we talk about performance, we're talking about ball flight, velocity, and what directly impacts your performance in the game. A lot of people don't even understand the things that you were just explaining, how all of those things link
Mm-hmm.
up to the arm. The
Yeah,
arm is what gives you that performance. It allows you to get
totally.
off the ball and empty
Totally.
all the energy and throw high below. It allows you to hold and throw your different pitch types
Yeah.
and do those things in game. And what people don't even understand is the way that rotational capacity and lat length and those things trickle down to the arm and
Yeah.
affect the arm. And I think,
Yeah.
we just have to do a better job of understanding how, the education is out there and understanding that, again, the same way that performance is not just in a silo, the arm is not in a silo. And we know
Yeah.
that. And it is connected to it is at the mercy, you say this all the time, it's at the mercy of the trunk, man. So
Yeah.
if that starts to break down, you're toast.
Yeah.
And I think about, too, what you said there, about the Ace getting 2 or 3 games. I watched a series, an SEC series this past weekend. The Ace was in there. She actually appeared in all 3 games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she
Not
needed it.
uncommon.
It's a big time when she appears in all 3 games. And the parity in softball right now is pretty high. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of really talented teams out there. There's not a lot of great pitching. There's not a
Mm-hmm.
lot of shutdown unicorns. We lost some last year in our game. Faremo, Fouts, some of those guys. We lost those guys. So we lost
Mm-hmm.
those unicorn people, and there's less and less out there. Well, this one of these teams, actually both of these teams, go into their midweeks this week. One of them lost the midweek because their best arm
Yeah.
couldn't be on the mound, so they lose their midweek. The other team walks off their midweek in the bottom of the 7th inning because their ace can't make an appearance, and the parity,
Yeah.
within that, it's crazy, man. There's not enough kids, and I just think we can do a better job of, continuing to develop athletes. You know how I feel about
Yep.
this, and really the reason
Mm-hmm.
why I'm here, my sole purpose
Yeah.
of what I feel at
Yeah.
OGX and Director Pitching Growth is just try to continue to get those athletes earlier and earlier so that we
Yeah.
can see more high-level kids at that game, so we don't have
Yeah.
to see these aces in 2 and 3 of the games.
Yeah.
And
So I think, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
my other quick reflection moment when you're talking about, putting my SEC coaching shoes back on, I had 2 things that come back, and you're going to know exactly here what I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about. Obviously, I had a kid when I first got there who didn't throw a lot and wound up to be a big deal for us. She had a flip arm slot. So that means,
Mm-hmm.
that when she worked overhead, she's on top of the ball. For those of you listening don't know, when she worked overhead, she's on top of the ball. And then she would flip her arm back up, right at the bottom and then release the ball. And what I didn't know then, what I began to understand was that put a lot of stress on the lower arm. In
Mm-hmm.
year 1, she handled that workload decently well. She had very little forearm pain. I knew what it was coming from, but she handled it really well because in the years up to that, she had not pitched a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Come around year 2, coming off
Mm-hmm.
of her first year of like really going, 100+ inning kid, we lost her in the middle of the year. We
Mm-hmm.
lost her, and it really hurt us.
Yeah.
But mostly because I didn't manage her workload well enough.
Mm-hmm.
And she came back, thanks to you guys and taking all my calls and talking me off the ledge. She
Mm-hmm.
comes back and, goes on to end her career pretty well, beats Georgia, beats Tennessee, and, ends it in a super great light. We go to a regional that year. But I just think if I could have managed her better, if I would have understood more, and even at that time, she was a kid who, like, she needed to throw a lot. Like, she needed a
Mm-hmm.
lot. And probably what I would have wished I would have done is we at that point in time, year 1, even early year 2, we didn't understand the intensity piece as much. It was like throw
Mm-hmm.
it 100% intensity all the time. So I
Mm-hmm.
think I probably could have fed her more in low intensity to give her a fix on her volume, but
Yep.
also, put my foot down and control her workload. And then my second one was year 3 there, my last year. We have a kid who, again, did not throw much in year 1 and year 2. She comes out in year 3. She's our girl. She's
Mm-hmm.
thrown, we're, barely in the SEC play. She's thrown 70 innings. She's lights out. She's a sub-2 ERA. She's cruising. But again, here it comes. Here comes the
Mm-hmm.
lack of performance. Exactly what I'm talking about. She has a bad game. She has a bad game. She has a bad week. And I tracked ball flight pretty regularly. That's one thing that I
Yeah.
probably could have done too, is track it, even more
Yeah.
regularly. But I tracked it pretty regularly, and I started to notice she was a backspin kid. The backspin started to get a ton of horizontal, so that told me, hey, the arm is not in the right slot to stay inside the ball to produce this backspin that she's had that's made her so good. And I, what do I know? The first thing I start to see lack of performance. Then I start to really pay attention to the ball flight. Then the performance is down, and then
Mm-hmm.
I start to take a video, and I'm like, whoa. These two videos,
Yep.
this arm does not look the same. And I reach out to you, and I was, again, talking me off the ledge. But I just was like, how are we going to get this back? And again, we got her back, but she still missed, 2 to 3 important weeks of time where I just feel like if I would have more regularly tracked,
Yeah.
movement quality, what it was lat length. It was lat length because her volume was too high. She had never experienced that amount of full intensity volume and in-game volume. And it was lat length. And right away, we were able to do some things to help her out and get her back in there. But I just feel like if I would have more regularly tracked movement quality, paid closer attention to ball flight than I even did, and taking regular video of my athletes, I probably would have caught it earlier.
Yeah, so this is interesting. Hindsight's 2020, because everyone's like, "Oh, if I could go back in time, I would be."
Right.
When you would reach out, I actually like have vivid memories of both of those circumstances. Like, help, I something, and I was like, that, like, the answer. I knew that I was not that like we were not going to give you any information that you were going to be like, I don't understand what you're talking about.
Right.
So what I think is interesting is you were, after year one, like you came in armed year two with so much more information. You are obviously you've always been smart and wanted to dig for information, but like year two, like your growth as far as like what is player development, how can I use it in my system, was like got better and better every single year. And so I reflected on, and still now reflect on, like, okay, someone like Ryker, who was excellent at his job and excellent at understanding player development. And I was not going to jump on the phone with you and tell you something that you're like, I'm so overwhelmed by this, or I don't know what you're talking about. Like you were going to be like, yep.
Yeah.
Like, why, in my mind, like, why can't Ryker, I knew I had to get on a call with him and just basically like bring him down for a second and be like, you already know this. Like, let's lay it out. Let's slow it down. Let's look at this layer. Let's trace it all the way back down. Like, how deep is this running?
Right.
So what would you say in those shoes? It's not a lack of information. It is not a like, you needed me, Ryker, because I knew something you didn't, right? Like, if that's not what we're talking about here, what keeps a coach, what kept you from being able to keep track of that and manage it when the season is swirling around you?
I was in the thick of it. You get in the thick of it, you kind of feel like you're on an island. The only thing, sometimes you're watching so much film, trying to prepare, for your next opponent. There's so many other things to your job, that you're trying to do, that sometimes your lens gets blurry. And the coach needs a coach. The coach needs somebody to go to, and especially for pitching, man, it's such a niche. It's such a niche in our game right
technical.
now where it's at. It is. And sometimes, my coworkers would be like, I hear you. I'll listen to you. I hear you. But I gotta get the hitters to hit.
Right.
We gotta play better defense, and we gotta do that. Everybody's on their thing, and sometimes you need somebody, man. And like, that was what you guys were for me, you specifically, is like, I knew that I could call you. I knew that I could kind of dump my brain out, and I knew that you could bring me back to a space that I knew I needed to be in. And I knew there was a system. Now, granted, things I could have done better, absolutely, but I knew there was a system. I needed my moment to dump my brain while it was swirling in all the places in the middle of season. I needed my people, and you guys were my people, and you were able to help me bring it back down. There are systems, there are protocols, there are case studies, there are, things that we can go after and that we've done, and just to remind me of that. So I think the coach needs a coach. You need your people that you can go to and talk to and bounce your ideas off, and that are going to understand. And, while I did know a lot because I had been with you guys for a couple of years, I think every conversation that I walked away from, with you or with you guys, I learned something. I definitely took something valuable away from it that I didn't have yet. So,
I think that's a great answer. And I think that, like the college consulting calls that I'm on now personally, sometimes they're like, this athlete is struggling with command. Sometimes it's very just like, what do you think? When you talk about like, you need someone, like, we've been working on this and she's still working command. And it's not like I'm a better coach. These are some of the best coaches in the country, but it's like, you need the sounding board to be able to like, what do you think? Right. It's like this circle. So I'll be like, okay, here are some examples. There's 3 different things. When I've had athletes who have done this, these are 3 different things. And it's not like, because I know everything and every question you have, I'm going to have the answer to, but there's like, we've got so much because we have so much data, we track what worked, what didn't, right? And so yeah, we have this opportunity to be like, let's try this, let's try this. If this works, we're going to see this. Here's how we can track command better. Here's ways where we can add more variability at different intensities. Do this. We have all these protocols in training, and sometimes it's as simple as something like we're trying to go after command. Other times it's as like, we're seeing a breakdown in patterns, and we're predicting that we are going to see like some arm pain here. And so let's go get that and change what she's doing before that. But so sometimes we're offering, you're right, this like level of information that might be a little above what the coach can keep track of, like movement quality and things like that. And sometimes,
but with our systems now, you guys have made it possible. I mean, even from the time that I've showed up to where we are now, like what Laura and you and all of you guys have put together, the systems that we have now to be able to offer these people is insane.
Totally. So it's like, yes, some of the information is like, man, you might need someone with like a level of expertise, and some of it isn't. Someone's like, you just need to bounce info off of somebody, because it's not like these coaches that are asking questions like her command is low of like, I've never trained command before. And you're right, they just are like, but that's not working. And we're all, as coaches, we're in a boat like that all the time. So it's like, what has worked for you? What has worked for you? And I think that's what I love about being in like a neutral, like you're not picking up the phone and calling another colleague in the SEC, like, you know what I mean? And so, like, if they give you information, toss that bad boy in the trash.
Dude, I get those texts all the time now. Like, now that I'm on the other side.
Yes,
like
when you're in the neutral, everyone's like, it's so obvious. Jordan Richwood, who's at Purdue now, obviously, is like a big piece of our heart because she spent years here before launching back into college coaching. And she said, like, I do miss obviously, we still work with her, but like, I miss the constant bouncing back and forth. She absolutely identified that when it comes specific to pitching and the like technicality of it. So a lot of the consulting calls are that, and I think coaches really need it. So I think you're right. I'm really glad you answered with that, because there's two sides of what goes into consulting. Provide coaches with information that they maybe are a little bit above what they would have thought, because it requires someone that's like not in charge of winning games to present that information to you, to tell you this is important to track. And some of it is just like, you need a network, man, because as I say, that circle it's fire, and the people that are in it are on fire all the time. And the people that are coaching those athletes are on fire all the time, and you need to be to win, but it also takes a toll. And it's important for someone to like bring a fire extinguisher every once in a while. That's basically what our phone calls were. I'd be like, let me literally like fire extinguisher, take a breath. You've got this. Let's talk about this. Yeah. And that's kind of like, what it is.
Like, we play LSU on Friday, and I don't know what I'm going to do.
Right. Like, you do. You know what you're going to do. So it's like, So, okay. With that said, I was also thinking about this concept of, in the past, obviously every year, our systems, the way in which we're able to, expand our systems, allow other people to access our systems, it's growing each year. Right. And so in the past, when it comes to the college game, we've always done consulting. But we really kind of, the heart of our work at the college level sits in these initial assessments early in the year to get the story about these athletes, about what do they do pattern wise that's influencing, what is their body doing that's influencing the arm, that's influencing the ball, right? And this information, like, I don't care how we evolve, it is so important, it's so critical, because it is like, if you said, like, you're going to keep training all of these athletes, but you're never going to get an assessment on any of them. Like, we start with an assessment with all of our athletes, we would be like, we're like driving blind.
You have to understand. You have to understand.
You have to understand, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. But the reality is, like, it takes a lot of work. Okay, so you understand an athlete's story. Maybe you even establish a plan for the fall. But it takes or even into like up to the season. But it takes a lot of time, energy, attention, a lot of work, a lot of capacity to get her to sustain that, because of how much of a beast workload is, because of how difficult our motion actually is, that it takes a ton of capacity to get a pitcher to sustain the performance that you worked for or that you identified in the fall. So I think this is unique, because we're also like, well, this athlete, let's say, for example, she has a -8 drop ball. But we make the assumption that in May, her drop ball is still -8. It might not be, right? Because the way fatigue has gone, you have to work hard as a coach to get her to stay there. I think that's the piece when I'm talking about pitcher athlete management, this is what we're talking
Yeah.
about. Like, okay, it's another beast in season to hold on to what's going to make her great.
Yeah.
So with that said, we obviously know that, like, okay, we want to be able to expand, how we work with college coaches logistically. We only even open up so many spots for assessments because it's also, crunched in a certain period of time. Budget
Yeah.
wise, that's not always appropriate for some, or feasible, I should say, for some coaches, some schools. So what we really want to be able to do is, like, listen, it may not start at this like point of origin of assessments for you, at least not in this like, full biomechanics element. But at the very least, I think we've got to work to get more programs and coaches on board with allowing us to extend our systems to them, which we've been working really hard to do, to
Totally.
manage, like, okay, what does your athlete have going into the season? What do we need to keep our eye on to make sure she holds that throughout the year? Like, she can't be
Yeah.
on this slow decline. We can't fall off a cliff, because it doesn't matter then if she was strong in February and March, if she just is hurt, or if that, she's just not the same pitcher, when we get into May. So what we really are going to work hard to do, because the game needs it and pitchers need this work and coaches need this support, is to be
Yes.
able to extend a more systemized platform for college coaches to work with us in a variety of ways, whether it's directly, indirectly, to be able to, like, what does it mean to truly manage a pitcher throughout the season. And so I'm excited about that. And so I don't know if you want to just comment on, I think, maybe like how that would have impacted you. I think back to,
Yeah.
like, when you came to visit us in the summer. I think you'd be between year 2 and year 3, and you already knew I need better systems. Like, you're like,
Yeah.
I've got a lot up here, but I need better systems. And we helped
Yeah.
design like an old
Yeah.
school dashboard for you. Like, I don't know. We like,
I remember it vividly.
duct tape
It was
things
in the old,
together. Yeah.
it was in the old facility. You guys
Yeah.
had like a little break. I was going from recruiting in
Yeah.
Indiana, like, and I was
Yes.
like driving through, and I stopped and stayed for a day or two and hung out with you guys. And we had a break and we went upstairs. And this is when
Yeah.
your guys' office was upstairs, and I
Yeah.
sat in like the middle on a stool, like in route with everybody around me,
Yeah.
and I was just like telling everybody like what I needed.
Yeah.
And
But we were
it's
showing you how we managed our athletes. And you're like, I need all of
yes,
this, right? We're like, this stuff
yes,
barely works for us right now. So in order for us to give this to you, we have to like duct tape it together and like flip it upside down, which we tried. But we've
right,
come a long way since then. But imagine
totally,
if you could take and I mean, we have coaches now. They're
right,
typically at, not true. We have a couple across different divisions actually who do this, but do our like highest level of like consulting, which involves us like managing all of this fully through our like current
yeah,
dashboards and all of this. But imagine you could take that robust system
yeah,
that maybe you were doing it on your own, maybe you had other people doing it for you, maybe we were helping do it for you, depending on what made sense, what was feasible for your budget. But if you could take that back, would that have been a game changer for you?
dude, are you joking? Like, it would have been insane. Like,
Yeah.
I think about, obviously I was able to see it, and hear from you guys of like the growth that we had as a pitching staff when I was at Ole Miss, from,
Hmm.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I was the first like full assessment that you guys ever came and did.
Yeah, you were the first in the SEC, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I
so.
think that's right, because Trisha was like next in line, and she was at ASU at the time, so she didn't qualify for the
Yeah.
SEC yet. So
Yeah.
the first SEC school, yeah, is when you called us. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it was the first time you guys had come out. And so to see, obviously I've seen it, your guys' visuals and your dashboards and stuff are so awesome for seeing growth. And, for to see the growth that we had there from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 and those athletes. And I think about, some days I was just winging it, man. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like,
Yeah.
I was trying to take in the information and spit it back out. You're not ready to give it to your athletes until you kind of understand it enough. And I was going through this phase of trying to learn it and spit it back out. And I just think, and sometimes it wasn't as systematic as it needed to be. Data was everywhere. It was in Rapsodo. It was here. It was there. And I think about what some schools that train with us now have. Like, you wrote their plyo programs. You wrote the plyos that they
Hmm.
do,
Hmm.
and we pull their ball flight data every day, every week. It goes into
Hmm.
a dashboard with the same visualization that they
Yeah.
had from their initial assessment, and Laura scores their movement. The things that we're able to do now, it's like we say this, they're an OGX athlete. Like
Hmm.
those college athletes now have the same management systems that our OGX athletes have. And I just think it would have been game changer for me. Those are definitely, I'm going to do a talk at Pitch Talk this year is my plan to, talk about if knowing, if I knew then what I know now and how I would do things and how I know that we now have the systems. And I remember being up there in that room and Laura being like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure I could like piece this together and put it in your folder for you for a couple $100 or something, And I was like,
We don't know.
perfect. Yeah.
Right.
Like, and it's been cool to see the growth. It's been cool to be a part of it now for the last, 6-7 months with you guys and seeing it and being a voice, on the college coach side for you guys and what you guys have done in the past and just seeing our involvement. I'm really excited about, those systems and what we're going to be able to bring to, the college coaching community and those athletes. I think it's
Yeah.
totally a game changer. And it's like you said, it's finding things more feasible. What can you do? Yes, you do need assessments. Those are the best thing that we provide in understanding that story. But also, if you do have a kid and understanding how our systems can help you manage that kid, and we talk about preserving what she has, but also growing what she has. It's
Yeah.
like I just think it's total game changer.
Yeah. I think you and I are both really passionate about like pitching at the
Yeah,
college level for a variety of reasons. And I think it just is like I don't know, I can feel the change, like the wave, the revolution, the like the hunger from
yeah,
college coaches wanting more from pitching. I always speak about this, but like at NFCA every year, pitch stock, like feeling the like this community of pitching coaches pushing for more. Like we don't want this
totally.
position left behind. I really love that. And I think at the youth level, it's more of like the individuals are doing that, individual like pitchers and their families. So there's something really
Sure.
special, I think, at the college level of this community that's being built. So the two places that I think are really, I think that you and I both really want to bring like a larger impact into the college game over the next year and beyond is definitely this element of like, what does it mean to manage pitchers? Of like, it's not
Yep.
just about understanding workload in game. I remember having a conversation once with a coach. This was maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and I said like she has to cut back on workload, and she laughed at me like laughed at me being like, there's no chance I'm cutting her workload because she is our ticket to, like postseason and beyond. And I'm like, no, 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 I didn't mean in game. I meant what you're doing, what she's being asked to do between games. She's going to need a
Yeah.
different, And so I was like, I'm not saying like you can't pitch her as much because people like hit the road or I'm out of a job. That's not what I was referencing. It was more of like the in between. So I think that not only really getting like us really redefining, pun intended, redefine the circle, but redefining like what it means to manage pitchers, fully
Yeah.
appreciating how brutal that position is throughout the year. It's not just about them being tough. Like being tough is
Yeah.
very, very important, but there's like a physical
Totally.
toll mental and physical toll that really is taken upon these athletes throughout the year. So us being able to launch those systems into the college scene a little bit more. And then in addition to that, more in this like off season time to build the community of coaches, which obviously we work to do in pitch stock. We have behind the scenes days, but like we have gone back and forth with having like it's like a book club, but for pitchers, for pitching coaches. But to be able to like have this not while in season, but something where coaches can really feel like they can like join and fire some things off of each other because you're right. I think
Totally.
like in a world that's very competitive while in season, if we're going to launch the position into a space where it should be, deserves to be, needs to be, we've got to work together. We all know that, right? And so I think we're in a space where hopefully we can lead some of that stuff. So those are two
Yeah.
spaces that you and I have really like talked about. So stay tuned for all of those obviously who are out in the pitching community for us to be continuing to give a little more details and specifics about how we plan to do those things, but definitely being able to reach more college coaches, not limiting it to only X amount of programs who can do biomechanics assessments is a huge one for
Yep.
us. So I'm
Totally.
excited to be able to launch that in the next few months and to be able to partner, like I said, directly with, and even just have some other coaches be able to like utilize the systems without necessarily needing access to a phone call with us every week. So great discussion. I think it's really inspiring. I'm excited about, that work. I know,
Me too.
yeah, I think it's really great just to like reflect on like when you're referencing some of these stories, some of these case studies, year one, year two, like
Yeah.
I can travel right back there and remember and just like
Oh,
this growth.
God.
So anyway, I appreciate you, Riker, you know that, just for like your willingness to, I don't know, keep climbing this, like this journey and this ladder
Yeah.
and keep giving back, and keep like supporting pitchers and other coaches. And so we're going to have like a lot more to come on how formally we're going to be able to do that. So thanks for joining today. Thanks for being who you are. And for all of you who watched today, I think we're going to keep this format with Redefine the Circle. I usually put out about 2 a month. So we'll keep one where I'll go into a little bit more of like some case studies, showing some things on my computer, getting into some nitty gritty, X's and O's. And then the second episode of the month will be Ryker and me. So we'll be chatting about some stuff because, you know, I call us the like dream team here. So as far as I'm concerned, we are. I'm biased because it's us, but we'll reconvene once a month to be able to get some good information out. So thanks again, Ryker, for joining us, and thanks to all of you for joining another episode between now and next time. Remember, keep questing on to redefine the circle.